Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Conversation with Chinh Chu, which is the inaugural event in our series, Rise from the Fall, Profile of a Vietnamese American Leader. I am Lien Hang Thi Nguyen, the Dorothy Borg Professor in the History of the United States and East Asia. I'm also director of the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, and last but not least, co-founder of Vietnamese Studies here at Columbia University. Before I begin, I'd like to thank my wonderful staff, without whom this event would have been impossible. And seriously, with all of our last-minute obstacles, it really would not have been pulled off without the staff who are all around us. And on behalf of all of us at the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, I'd like to thank you, our guests, for traveling from afar and taking the time to be with us today. Now, legend has it that eons and eons ago, we Vietnamese were descendants of a magical union between a dragon, Lac Lam Quân, and a phoenix, O Cơ. According to this legend, while half went north with Lac Lam Quân, the others marched southward alongside O Cơ. Over the millennia, and here, folks, I'm going to insert actual events as a historian in this mythical creation narrative, the Vietnamese with O Cơ feuded bitterly with their compatriots in the north, eventually fleeing their homeland on April 30th, 1975 for distant shores. Taking that as my inspiration for this Rise from the Fall series, Vietnamese Studies at Weatherhead is exploring these exceptional journeys in the lead up to 2025. A half-century on, we Vietnamese have risen from the proverbial ashes of a smoldering South Vietnam to rebirth overseas. I like that. Did you guys notice I've married two mythical Phoenix legends, one based in Vietnam with the Western civilization canon, reaching even greater heights, even here in the city of New York. And of all the profiles of exceptional Vietnamese in America, one stands out among the millions, that of Chinh Chu. As an hour will not do justice to Chin's rags to riches story, today's events can only give you a glimpse of this leader's trajectory. On all metrics, depth of hardship, extent of climb, and global philanthropic reach, Chin's story is truly an inspiration. And now, let me bring up Naja Pham Lockwood, who will do the honors of introducing Chin. Naja? And I'm going to make her stand right next to me as I deliver this bio, because in many ways, Naja herself falls into this category of an exceptional Vietnamese American leader. As founder and CEO of Rise Media Ventures, she has executive produced multiple documentary and narrative films focusing on social justice, including 76 Days, Try Harder, Coming Home Again, Gook, and Cries from Syria. Naja's Rise Media Ventures, which supports stories of diverse voices and an investor in Impact Partners Films, financed the Academy Award-winning documentary Icarus, as well as Won't You Be My Neighbor? I'm watching that one right now, and Audrey and Daisy. She served on the Sundance Utah Advisory Board and partnered with Sundance Institute to build and fund the Sundance Screenwriters Fellowships for Asian American filmmakers. She currently serves on the board of the Utah Film Commission and the Center for Asian American Media, CAM. Naja is an associate instructor at the University of Utah, teaching the power of storytelling, Asia, and the global cinema. Born in Vietnam, Naja's rebirth from the fall in 1975 would unfold in Massachusetts, to New York, to San Francisco, and ultimately in Utah, where she now resides. Now, I had the opportunity to spend some great time with Naja and her director, Tony Bui, in Vietnam a few months ago. By the end of that trip, we had become like family, and I am proud to announce that they will be Weatherhead's Asia in Action speaker and artist in residence, respectively, next academic year. So you really need to stay tuned for more events coming from the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, in particular Vietnamese Studies at Columbia. But without ado, I'm going to send this over to Naja.
Thank you, Han. What an amazing turnout. Good evening. Good evening, Vice President Amy Rutherford, Dean Carol Becker, Dean Karen Yari Milo, Dean Emerita Emeritus Yano, Vice Provost Eugenia Lean, Professor Hung, and distinguished professors of Columbia University, Dr. and Mrs. Chu, Congressman Joseph Cao, family and friends, welcome. We have a full house tonight. I'm proud to introduce my good friend and our moderator tonight, An Do, who will lead a conversation with Chinh Chu, a part of the Columbia series, Rise from the Fall, Profile of a Vietnamese American Leader. An is a reporter for the Los Angeles Times. She has spent more than 30 years in journalism, and she has built a dedicated career on documenting the Vietnamese American diaspora throughout the US. Friends, I am honored and deeply moved to speak to you today about my friend Chinh Chu. I first met Chinh as a 23-year-old woman, having just came back from my studies abroad in Hanoi, Vietnam. Back then, there were probably no more than 5 Vietnamese Americans on Wall Street. Chinh was already a VP at the Blackstone Group. He was like a big brother to me. As a daughter of Vietnamese refugees, I was new to my surroundings on Wall Street. I had never met an Asian American man with a BMW. I never had met any Vietnamese who lived on the Upper East Side in a doorman building. It was very inspiring to see a Vietnamese American like Chinh breaking all sorts of cultural and economic barriers in this world. Chinh was always incredibly kind and an inclusive friend. I remember how he would organize weekend dinners and trips with mutual friends who were all first gens, including Indians, Vietnamese, and Chinese on Wall Street. Our lives have been so busy, and I just recently reconnected with Chinh in person. At that lunch, I was deeply moved to see that Chinh has not changed from that young Blackstone VP. First, he has not aged. In fact, he is looking even more fit now, being an avid mountaineer throughout the world. Chinh is still the fearless, intense, and focused man who still has this self-deprecating humor that makes everyone feel comfortable. He continues to make me laugh all the time. And he continues to have a beautiful, generous heart to all his friends. But there is also a change in Chinh after 30 years. It was beautiful to see how much he loves his 2 daughters, Diana and Angelina. And it is also inspiring to see his commitment to give back to our community, whether it is here in New York City with music and the arts through the Lincoln Center, or with his parents supporting humanitarian causes throughout Vietnam. I look forward to Chin's next chapter with philanthropy. To me, Chinh represents the best of America. A child of Vietnamese refugees, Chinh came to America at the end of the Vietnam War in 1975. He is the eldest of 6 children born to Dennis and Linda Chu, who is here tonight. Chinh started his career in M&A at Salomon Brothers and then joined Blackstone in the early 90s, where he spent 25 years at the firm, becoming the head of the software and technology, financial services, chemical, and the healthcare groups. He served on Blackstone's executive committee, co-chaired its private equity group, and was a member of its investment committee. I am not going to name them all, but let's just say Chinh has led some of the most prominent and successful private equity deals at Blackstone. And as if this was not enough, Chinh then went on to find CC Capital in 2016 and has since spearheaded both traditional and private equity investments, as well as a series of SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies. Whereupon he led the successful $7.2 billion deal of the private transaction for Dun & Bradstreet in February 2019. And less than 18 months later, Dun & Bradstreet was taken public at a 3x return for CC Capital's equity investors. Chinh is a dedicated philanthropist in America and with his parents in Vietnam with their family foundation. He is a model for future Vietnamese Americans in terms of philanthropy and responsibility of giving back to the country that has given us so much. I would like to say a word about the format for today's talk. Chinh and An will have a conversation, And if you have any questions, we ask that you write them down on the question sheets that were in your seat, and then give them to a Weatherhead staff member who will be circulating to collect them at 5:30 p.m. We will only be taking questions that are written out. From 6 to 7, there is a reception in this room, and we invite you to stay and mingle. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please give a hand to Mr. Chinh Chu.
Thank you, Naja. It is an absolute pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm truly humbled at the opportunity to talk and have a conversation. It started out, of course, with Naja coming into our office. We haven't connected for a number of years. And after lunch, she had a meeting with the Columbia deans, and she came back and she says, Chinh, would you consider giving a little talk at Columbia? So to me, that meant 10-minute talk, 10 students, 15 students. Sure, Naja, let's give a talk. And then later on, said, would you mind a little bit larger? I said, sure. To me, that meant maybe 30 people, 20 minutes of my time. But of course, Naja is very convincing, and it goes on and on and on. And here we are today. Thank you for the opportunity, Naja. Before we start, I would like to reciprocate for Naja talking about the BMW and the dinners by telling you guys that Naja is not her real name. It's a name that she conjured up to be sophisticated when we were young. Her real name is Nga, and nobody knows that, including you. So I would like everybody who deals with Naja to call her by her real name, please. It's not really Naja. But thank you very much. It's an honor, and I'm really humbled.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your grace of presence tonight. We're in a big city, and I know you have big opportunities of where you can be this evening. So we're especially grateful that you're here. And Chinh, you're a model for how a refugee has overcome so much to reach extraordinary success. I think your journey defines you, and it fascinates those around you. We come here today to share part of that, and I'd like to go a little bit backward before we move forward. I know that our audience will be really kind tonight. To start with, you and your family came to the US in 1975 as part of the first wave of immigrants to America at the end of the Vietnam War. Tell us about that transformative experience. How old were you? Who came with you? And what, if any, belongings did you take with you?
The Vietnamese journey to America in 1975 was a very sudden shock for the Vietnamese people. As you know, the war ended pretty quickly on April 30th, 1975. And I think my family's journey is not that much different from a lot of other families out there. I think there was 125,000 immigrants that ended up in the US. There were many more that ended up in Canada, Australia, the rest of Europe. We learned that we needed to evacuate. My dad was already in America, in Hawaii, and we learned that we need to evacuate because the war was ending. America, of course, was pulling in support. So we had a very short time to leave the country, and my mom led 5 of us, my little sister was not born yet, along with my grandmother, to leave the country, and we ended up in Guam, a refugee camp, a military base and a refugee camp, I think 2 days before the war ended, April 28th. What did we take? I think we took a very small suitcase with us, because we had to evacuate very quickly. In Guam, 2 days after we got there, my mom gave birth to my little sister, Kathy. And literally, I think it was almost on the hour we lost our country on April 30th, 75, when Kathy was born. So there was 5 of us, my grandmother, my mom, who was in the hospital, and Kathy was born literally on almost the hour that we lost our country.
That's amazing that she was that close to giving birth. Can you imagine? I'd like to briefly acknowledge anh Ching's parents. Dạ, xin mời hai bác đứng lên một chút được không ạ? Say hello to everyone. This is Dennis and Linda Chu. Thank you for joining us tonight.
So I think a lot of the hardships that were endured was not endured by us. It was really our parents who had the burden of taking care of kids. I was 9 or 10 years old, 9.5 years old at the time, and my brothers and sisters range from that until obviously Kathy giving birth. So imagine a family that had to evacuate, come to America with 6 kids, a grandmother, no English, ending up in a refugee camp.
No English.
Well, I think we had $10. We had some money. So no English, $10, coming to America and starting your life over. It's really a tribute to my parents, not what we've done.
Yeah, and that tribute that anh Ching mentioned to his parents is something that we'll come back to later on in the program. I think all of us who are children of immigrants, it's so easy to tell the story just using basic, simple sentences. But when you actually visualize the journey and the sweat and the stress and just facing something absolutely unknown, only can you begin to understand an iota of the challenges in front of you. What did your parents do in Vietnam?
My dad was a doctor, but he was also in the military. He jumped out of airplanes. He he fought in the war. He operated people, so a little bit of a jack of all trades, being a doctor. My mom was a school teacher, and we lived what we call the middle-class life in Vietnam, but it's very different from here. We grew up without a bathroom. We grew up without running water. We grew up literally going to the river to use the restroom. So very different lifestyle, obviously, in America. And it was not only the conditions that we lived in, it was just the constant fear of war, because my dad went to war. And he would come home a few days a month. We would see him a few days a month. My mom took care of the kids. And she stressed education, she stressed hard work, she stressed taking care of the siblings. We had a pretty happy childhood, despite what we would think right now as adverse conditions.
But it's adverse conditions, I think, and the strength that you have inside all of us to overcome that eventually helps you weave that larger story. So how did the parents, with your dad already in the US practicing medicine, studying, how did they reunite?
We were in Guam for a while until we got the paperwork, and then we reunited in Hawaii. My dad was in America learning English and not per se practicing medicine because he didn't have a degree yet. So after we reunited in Hawaii, we stayed there for 1.5 years to 2 years, and then we went to New York City, where my dad studied medicine again, got his EACFMG after he learned English, and he became a doctor in America after a few years.
Yeah, another hardship and another element of the perseverance that you were taught growing up. I think as so much of immigrant life in America involves who helped us along the way. And people that helped you in school, in day-to-day living, all those early years in Hawaii, and then later in Queens, when you came to New York. I also did a lot of research and talked to people who know you, and they said that your mom had a strong, steady hand in raising you with her emphasis on education. What does that role play in your household in the past? And did you grow up in a pretty strict environment?
I grew up in what I thought a typical Vietnamese environment, but we had very strong, loving parents who worked really, really hard. And so we saw the work ethics, we saw the emphasis on education. Obviously, my mom was a teacher, so It was something that came almost organically, not something that she had to stress. And my dad, I remember when we first came to America, before my dad became a doctor, again, we had, my parents had to do jobs that are manual labor, right? My dad cleaned, I think, bedpans in a hospital. My mom, sometimes we would help out. My mom would clean houses. Honest, honorable living, just to bridge the gap before we were stabilized again. But the focus on education was there, the focus on hard work was there, but the key was the family unit and how we went through the adjustment in America.
It's so fascinating to see the early stages of immigration when our elders came, and no one really had just one job. Everyone had a full-time job, a part-time job, and then maybe a second part-time job. And then in between they raised their kids, and just learning the very basic of things, like how to open a bank account, how to enroll your kids in school, things that modern day life, for Vietnamese families, we completely take for granted. And I really give so much credit to our older generation for establishing some of these and helping us. And they did all of this without phones or the internet, right? In so many Asian American families, I know that the older generation push their kids toward careers of respectability. And I'm sure that aside from our audience members tonight, there's a significant number of people working in finance, but there must also be engineers, doctors, and then some that have gone toward the arts, professional performing arts or fine arts. Did you ever feel that push, Chinh?
My parents really wanted us to be doctors because it was the noble profession in the Vietnamese culture. Up until 10 years ago, I'm not sure my parents knew what I did. I think they understand it now, but I'm not sure they did all these years. And so I actually started out in college taking some pre-med classes, some bio classes to try to please my parents. But my natural inclination and passion was business. So it was a very easy switch to go into the business side of the world.
What led you to business? Not just the passion, but you told me once this story, which I thought fascinating. In college, Chinh was going to university in Buffalo, and every summer he had a sales job. Tell us more about that.
So it started out actually in high school and junior high school. I think I have a couple high school friends here where we sold potato chips and newspaper subscriptions and other things in high school on an entrepreneurial way to make money. That was successful. And then in college, instead of getting a regular summer job, I was a door-to-door encyclopedia and cookbook salesman. So I sold everything from cookbooks to beautiful Bible stories to study guides to whatever it was. The company was named the Southwestern Company. So at the beginning of summer, they would ship you to Nashville to have a 1-week training school to learn how to sell. And literally selling means knocking on a door of somebody you don't know and try to get in the house, and within 30 minutes, try to sell a set of cookbooks or encyclopedias, whatever you judge they need, and taking a 40% deposit without giving them the books. And then promising at the end of the summer to come back and give them the books because all you had was just a sample. So they shipped us the first summer to West Virginia, thinking that would be a great territory for an Asian student. So we knocked on doors 13 hours a day, 6 days a week, and I found actually it to be invigorating to get rejected 20 doors in a row when they don't let you in, to run around in the sun and just be exhausted by the time it's 2 o'clock and have 0 sales. And it was 0 commission, it was, zero base salaries, all on commission. Eventually, you learn how to do it, and you learn how to do it well. And my first summer, we were able to make enough money to buy a car and pay for college. I think my check was $6,000 of profit in 1988. But it was selling books through the door, so I did that for a few summers during college.
I think that's really character building, because imagine just after the 5th house that slams the door in your face and tell you to take a hike, many people would just hang up. But the twist was that you sold these products without having the actual product. Not many people can close a deal like that, you know, so it kind of prepared you for learning the numbers, learning the ropes, and what led you to finance? Because in those days, Vietnamese American college students just didn't go into investments, and our parents had no background knowledge of that so-called foreign world.
So after a number of successful summers selling books, I was convinced I'm going to go into sales or become a motivational speaker or go into marketing or so I applied at, I remember, Ford Motor Company to be a marketing person, Macy's down at Herald Square. So I got offers from Macy's to run, I think it was to be a buyer for the women's department at Macy's, believe it or not. That would have been an interesting job. And that was my career. I was headed that way. And then I saw an ad in the Wall Street Journal talking about financial analyst program on Wall Street for a 2-year program in mergers and acquisitions. I had no idea what that was, so I looked it up. I went to University of Buffalo, so that wasn't a very popular career. And so I sent out, and actually, this is a little embarrassing, I saw a movie named Wall Street right after that. And I associate Wall Street, okay, I get it. It's a pretty exciting lifestyle. So I submitted 13 or 14 letters to apply for Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, all these firms to be in the financial analyst program. I went off to Christmas vacation and came back, and I got 14 replies. I was really excited, opening up the letters one by one. They were all rejections because I wasn't qualified, they say, to be granted an interview. So just like in sales, I got 14 rejections. I said, oh my God, this is really exciting. That means this is a really good job. They really are missing something. I really belong here. So I then went out to 85 Broad Street, where Goldman Sachs headquarters was. I just sat in the lobby for a day, talking to everybody, figuring that eventually they'll give me an interview. Eventually, security guard kicked me out, no jobs, no interview. And then at Cornell, I found out they were hosting a reception for Salomon Brothers for this exact same program. So we drove from Buffalo, snuck in through the side door, and came in, and I met Paul Wetzel and Richard Blackett. And they were very nice, and they said, look, you don't belong here, but we'll give you an interview if you come down next week. And so that's how I got an interview at Salomon Brothers. And I BS my way through a job. I literally did not know anything about financial analyst program.
Are there any college students or young graduates in the audience? Raise your hand. Yeah, are you guys taking notes on this technique?
I don't think it'll work today, guys.
Why not? Why wouldn't it work? No? No? Never give up. That's the philosophy. So by now, you've decided to pursue investment banking and private equity. You did a stint with the aforementioned mergers and acquisitions department at Salomon. You know, how did you come up with a strategy to finally get hired? Because after that, you know, you ventured over to Blackstone. Put us in the room where you pitched the strategies to Mr. Schwartzman and replay some of that conversation.
After 2 years as a financial analyst back then, it was 1990, most people went back to grad school. So I wanted to stay on Wall Street. So I interviewed with a number of firms. I got job offers at some of the larger firms, but I also interviewed at this very small firm, Blackstone. And I know it's really incredible to think of Blackstone as a small firm, but way back in 1990, Blackstone was a very small firm compared to Goldman Sachs, compared to other private equity firms, KKR. The firm got started not too long ago, and I met Steve Schwarzman during this interview, and he was painting this grand picture of what Blackstone could be. Incredible vision. We're going to be the largest private equity firm in the world. We're not going to only be private equity. We're going to do this, that, and the other thing. And I was just absolutely enamored with the vision. And I took a leap of faith and figured that I would work with Steve in a very small environment. It worked out great. If not, I'll go back to grad school in a couple years. So I went to Blackstone, and Blackstone was so small then, you did everything from M&A, what I did at Salomon Brothers, to private equity. We did some real estate deals on the side. We just did restructuring deals. We had a merger arbitrage business then, so we just did everything. And I just learned a lot and grew very quickly at Blackstone, so I decided to stay. It's been an incredible journey, and as you know, I was at Blackstone for 25.5 years before I left about 6.5 years ago.
Did he ever reflect on that first meeting with you and he said, you were just sitting in front of me and this is what I thought of you?
He did. He and I have lunch very regularly, including today, and he reflected on that. He thought I was completely raw. He was taken aback by the West Virginia salesperson story, and he laughed at that. I think in his mind, one great thing about Steve is that he identifies talent. And as you know, building a firm is really about identifying talent, nurturing it, and adapting that talent to your mission statement and having the right culture and the right people. It's really people, people, people when you build a firm. And if you look at Blackstone today, one of the incredible things about Steve is that if you look at John Gray, Barada, who's head of private equity, David Blitzer, who's head of Tact Ops, and obviously I left Blackstone, but the four of us did not have an MBA. So he selected individuals that he thought was talented. He helped mold us, he helped mentor us, and the firm is an incredible firm because of the people in it. And I think that's one important lesson, obviously, to be learned.
Yeah, it makes all the difference in the world when you have the correct alchemy and find that absolute right person, whether it's for your project or for, you know, your personal life. And I think the talent spotting, like you said, is a major talent in itself. I would hope that some members of our audience, you know, when you're thinking about interviewing people or you're going to an interview yourself, the authenticity shines through, right? You were showing him kind of a sense of your energy, like this is what I can do. I don't have the right pedigree, but what does the right pedigree mean anymore in this global society? It's something that I think is really, really fascinating. But, you know, you're working right now at Blackstone. Were you just toiling day and night? Were you, in a sense, replicating some of the life lessons that your parents taught with their sweat? I've done literally hundreds of interviews with Vietnamese Americans of all ages, of all stripes. And across the board, no matter where they came from, one thing emerged, which is that incredible work ethic. How did, you know, that refugee survival instinct, how did it shape you?
The work that we did in M&A and investment banking was really long hours, hard work, and stressful. But I view that as a good thing, not a bad thing. I think we have the privilege, we have an incredible opportunity to learn, to get well compensated in our fields and grow as individuals. I remember in the first 7 years in my career, if you can get home to watch Seinfeld at 11 o'clock at night, it would be a good night. So any night of the week, including Saturday and Sundays, if you get home to watch Seinfeld, it would be great. So we used to work incredible hours from 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night, 6 nights a week. But I never thought of it as a toil or hard work. I felt I was learning a lot, I was growing, and it was an absolute pleasure. And I think part of it's the refugee mentality, part of it's what my parents bestowed to me, and I enjoyed the work. And as you know, the old adage, if you really enjoy the work, it's really not work.
Right, right. The passion that's sort of like a thread, something that only you want to follow, and then you bring it to all elements and different phases of your life. Being at this stage, you're already sort of into the groove. I want to talk a little bit about SPACs. You were already ahead of the curve working with SPACs. Can you explain to the layman what that means?
Sure. Maybe if we were talking about SPACs, I think talk about private equity. What we were able to witness and help build in private equity from 1990 and 25 years later was incredible growth in private equity. If you think about it, in 1990, there was only $7 billion of transactions that were done that year in private equity. 25 years later, or today, let's forward today, so 30 years later, over $700 billion of transaction in private equity. So the growth, meteoric growth of private equity, we were able to really ride that wave and benefit from that, and that's a testament to Steve and the forerunners in private equity. The reason private equity has grown so much is that it has produced superior returns relative to the risks compared to other asset classes. Whether it's Columbia University or a pension fund for New York State, these endowments and pension funds need to generate superior returns to fund the university, to pay the pensions of police officers and healthcare workers. And those pension funds endowments usually target a 7.5% return each year. And the allocation back when in 1990, when I first got started in the business, was very little private equity. These endowments and pension funds usually only have 4 to 5% in that asset class. And they had 40% equities, and the remainder was in cash and treasuries, fixed income securities. But the problem is, if you're trying to earn 7 to 8%, and equities, as you all know, having a lot of finance people here, earn an average of 9 to 10% compounded over a 40, 50-year period, but you only have 40% of your money, of your proceeds in that, you can't earn that 7% or 8% for overall. So the various endowments and pension funds need to figure a way to have higher returns. Otherwise, the system would be broken. So private equity was a very interesting asset class that people were learning about way back when I got started. That 40%, that 4% allocation is now 20% today for pension funds on average, and the 4% allocation today for endowments, I think Columbia has a $13.3 billion endowment, is approximately 40%. So it's grown that much that that gave the rise to private equity. And why is that? Because private equity generated, according to a study by, I think it was Kaplan and Harris, over a very long period of time, superior returns. Private equity generated 17% return compared to the stock market, which has a 10% return, with half the standard deviation of risk. So you have lower risk on average, or lower variations of return, but higher returns. And that's in a very simple way, explains the rise of that asset class, private equity. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Or is that too much?
I only caught 80% of that. How about you guys? Yeah, I need more financial lessons. But I find it fascinating, people who have a head for numbers, since I clearly lack so much of it. But I'm fascinated by how you manipulated the strategies in order to have the best result possible.
Yeah, I don't think it's manipulation. I think private equity was born out of financial engineering at first, the first phase of private equity in the early 1990s. Then it evolved into something very different. It evolved into finding great companies and also having operational bent to have best of breed ways of managing the business to generate superior returns. So it is an evolution of the industry, but very simply, private equity yields superior returns with lower variations than the stock market. And that's why the various pension funds and endowments are increasingly putting in more money into alternative assets to generate higher returns for various institutions, including Columbia and various pension funds in New York.
So at this time when you were immersed in the thick of this, you were one of the few Vietnamese Americans working in that environment. And is this the time when Naja, or is it Nga?
Yeah,
that
it's
you
Nga, it's not Naja.
kind of like stumbled toward each other and created your own crowd?
Yeah, I think at that point there were very few Asians and certainly very few Vietnamese Americans working in finance. So it was a very small group of people, and we met through various different parties.
And you organized all those weekend outings, right?
I guess I did.
Yeah. Wow. You're the founder of CC Capital. What led you to venture out on your own?
After being at Blackstone for 25 and a half years, I felt that I've done most everything I wanted to do at Blackstone. And I wanted to create my own firm, start my own firm with Doug, my co-founders here today, to do the same thing but with a very different bent. We want to focus on only very high quality companies and invest with longer duration capital at CC Capital. So it could be a combination of traditional private equity deals, or it could be in the form of a SPAC, which could segue into your question. So an example of a traditional private equity deal was we took Dun & Bradstreet, which is a 150-year-old, 174-year-old company actually, private back in 2019. This is a company that has had Lincoln and a couple of presidents working inside the company. That's how old the company is. Phenomenal business, but with a little bit of a broken culture. So we were able to buy the company, take it out of the stock market for $7.1 billion. We put in $2 billion of equity and reinvigorate the company by changing over management. I think most of the top managers we replaced. We took out costs. We sold the business, we bought a business, but the key was that we reinvigorated growth. The company needed to grow, the company needed investment, and the company grew under our ownership, despite the fact that over the last decade, Dun & Bradstreet was flat, didn't grow at all. We then took it public again in a very short period of time, and as you, I think Naja mentioned, our $2 billion of equity capital was increased to over $6 billion within a very short period of time, given the operational changes that we made to the company. And once again, it comes down to people, as we talked about before, and culture. The people we changed at the top, and we changed the culture from a very stagnant culture into growth.
So the people, once again, sort of the talent spotting, right? Putting in the right personalities in the spaces that lack them. Yeah. When do you think we can expect to see more Asian Americans on Wall Street?
I think the present. There's a large group of Vietnamese finance professionals here, and it's gratifying to see the great talents being diverted from medicine to go into finance. It's great to see from all over, actually, from BlackRock, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, some hedge funds being here. And I'm very gratified to see that. I think it's the present, it's not the future.
That's great. There's one thing that I've been curious ever since I started researching you. And because I had your full name, I didn't have like a newly created name. I was able to get quite a detailed dossier. So what does it mean for you to be Vietnamese American in this industry where there are so few like you with someone of your background?
I think the great thing about finance is that there's no glass ceiling. It doesn't matter whether you're a Vietnamese American or you're any other nationality. I think what we look for is talent. We look for great people. We look for potential. We look for somebody who work hard, and there's no glass ceiling. So, yes, it's great to see other Vietnamese American, but frankly, there's no glass ceiling. There's no issues with being Vietnamese. I've never found that to be an issue.
Yeah, I think it seems like you started puncturing that glass ceiling a little bit in your early years when you walked in and crashed the party and got your interview and things like that. I want to take a gentle step over to fatherhood. I find that part of your life, part of what makes you whole and what is sort of like underneath driving that passion. What is the best piece of advice that you've given your daughters?
Love to cover that, but do you want to talk about the SPAC? You had one question that I didn't answer. So you asked the question, what is a SPAC in very simple terms? SPAC, as you know, is a special purpose acquisition company. That's what the acronym stands for. Very simple term, it's a way to take a company public in a differentiated manner instead of through the traditional IPO. A SPAC, very simply, is a pool of capital that you merge with a business to take the company public through that pool of capital instead of going through a traditional IPO process. Morgan Stanley would take you public, you would go and meet with investors and try to raise the capital. A SPAC merges with the company and provides a whole host of other advantages to the company, including, in many cases, already the capital is already there. You have sponsorship from people like us or other CEOs. So you have built-in sponsorship, you have built-in shareholders. So it's a differentiated way of going public. So that's the answer to that.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Of the SPACs that are very high profile that you've been at the helm of, was there one for the snack food company that you mentioned that those snacks your daughters are absolutely obsessed with?
So my daughters love Utz. So we now have a rule in the house. I don't buy Utz at home anymore because they get consumed really, really quickly. So one of our transactions was to merge one of our SPACs to de-SPAC, as they call it, with a family-owned business, a 99-year-old family-owned business based in Pennsylvania called Utz. They make potato chips, pretzels, second largest snack manufacturer in the US. And the family chose to partner up with us to go public and take our investment, despite the fact that they were pitches by Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley to go public traditional way. And there were also attempts by private equity firm to buy the company or to do a traditional private equity deal. I think it's a very high quality business. It has a lot of runway. It has expansion opportunities to the West Coast and the Midwest. And we think we're going to be an investor in that for a long time. It's a very good example of how a SPAC could be paired up with a very, very high quality business.
What convinced them to go with you versus all those other competition?
It certainly comes down to the structure is a differentiated structure. It certainly comes down to for us to be good partners, but really, once again, it goes back to the people. There was a good partnership. They feel that we could provide them certain advantages, being on the board, being partners with them. We have a playbook to help us grow faster. We have a playbook to help them achieve more value. So it comes down to the people. So a lot of the deal business comes down to people.
So the chemistry. Yeah. Going back to my earlier question, what is the best piece of advice that you've given your daughters, you think?
Pursue passion, pursue happiness. And what I ask them, and Diana will tell you, and Angelina will tell you, almost on a daily, certainly weekly basis, random acts of kindness. So we always talk about not so much grades, but what did you do today for random act of kindness? I think it's very important. Living in the world we live today, where we're so privileged, we're so blessed with everything we have, everybody in this room, to make sure that we give back, make sure that we are good people, not just take everything for granted. So we talk about that pretty consistently, almost on a daily basis.
I think it's very endearing that someone with your sort of intense schedule finds the time to take your daughters to school, as you were telling us about, and then you're teaching them the importance of passion, but also the importance of charity. You know, you're taking them in the summers for 2 to 3 weeks to places like Peru, Tanzania, Vietnam. You don't want to just write a check. You want the children to experience with their own eyes, to wade into unknown territory and connect with the local community, find out what their needs are, and maybe try to meet them.
I think that's very important. I think whether whatever you do at a small or big level, it's important not to only write checks, but to be involved, to be there with your time and your ideas and your contributions. I think it's important. I also think philanthropic work is not writing a check and having your name on the building. I think that's, for people who do that, it's great, all respect in the world. But I think it's more, the true giving is how you influence and how you leave a legacy. And I think that's what we try to strive for. And I think we're at very early stages of it.
Yeah, well, it needs to start young, so I'm really excited to hear about something like that. With the Wall Street mountains that you've climbed, you know, you now have a foundation, and partnering with your parents, you're intensifying your focus on giving back. Are there certain areas that especially interest you? How are you transitioning to philanthropy?
Yeah. I think I'm behind. I think we're all so busy with our worlds. We talk about philanthropy a lot, but we don't actually spend as much time as we should doing that. So I think we're behind. We try to have a little focus on our firm. I try to do it personally, but frankly, life sometimes gets in the way. And we need to, for myself, need to accelerate that over the next 5 to 10 years. I was talking to Lian and Naja about that, on how to actually really focus on that over the next 5 to 10 years. My parents and I focus on causes in Vietnam, whether it's schools or humanitarian projects. My daughters have an interest in Tanzania, land conservation, and I also do a lot of work in New York City with regards to other causes relating to education and music, but I think we are behind and we need to accelerate that.
I like this sort of we are behind kind of answer, because sometimes that propels you, you know, realizing that, or even thinking that you're a little bit behind, it gives you that oomph, kind of like that push. And then somehow you'll end up being further ahead quicker than you might think. Before we continue, I want to check with Han. How are we doing on time? Perfect. Good. Okay. Yeah, I think Ying, tonight you've given us this measure of your rare energy and wisdom. And we are very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that. To our audience, we really thank you again for being with us and for the questions that you have submitted. I'm going to turn over the program to Naja, AKA Gan, to sort of direct us into the next phase. You need to give yourself a big round of applause, and also to Anking.
Thank you. We only have 5 minutes for questions, and thank you. I have quite a few. So let's start.
You actually have a little more than 5 minutes. I'll let you know.
I'm sorry?
You have more than 5 minutes.
Wonderful. The first question.
Do we need to play the Jeopardy theme? Yeah.
What do you consider as your biggest mistake throughout your life? How did this event push you forward?
That's a good question. You know, I would advise everybody to go back to grad school. I've always had this consistent theme. I had a chance to go back to grad school, although I've had a terrific career without that. I would say that in finance, it is a long marathon punctuated by a series of continuous sprints. So make sure that you have perspective on it. It's a very long career, so from a perspective of that. And my other regrets are just spending time with my grandmother before she passed away. And I always talked about spending time with her.
In Vietnam or in the US?
In America. She was actually in California. That's my biggest regret. But from a career perspective, it's make sure that you have the right perspective in career. I never did get a chance to go out to California to spend extended vacation with my grandmother.
Thank you. Part of growing a business is hiring good people. What is your philosophy on hiring? People are the foundations to your success, and also how you build the culture after you have the right people is important. At Blackstone and at CC Capital, it's very important to have the best people. The culture is very important, and then the guardrails and the philosophy of the firm, whether it's intellectual honesty, the work ethos, but it comes down to the best people. All right, I'm going to attempt this. Can you please share your thoughts on the viability of SPAC route to public listing in the future, given regularity and scrutiny?
So the SPAC market today has imploded. When we first got started 6 years ago, the SPAC market was a relatively small market. The total SPAC volume that year for IPOs was $4 billion. Today, I'm sorry, not today, but a year and a half ago, at the peak of the SPAC market, that number went from $4 to $160 billion. It went from 13 deals to 575 transactions. And instead of having great investors looking to do deals and making great investments, you had literally everybody raising their hand to try to make a quick buck. You have middle managers leaving companies to do a SPAC. You have investment bankers who are not qualified to do a SPAC. You have politicians trying to do a SPAC. You have athletes trying to do a SPAC. And naturally, with the investment banks letting everybody in, this market went from literally $4 billion to $160 billion of capital in 1 year. So it has imploded because when you have 575 people looking for deals, there are not enough companies out there to satisfy that. So the quality of the deals that were done in the SPAC market, frankly, very few high-quality companies. A number of it were just flying cars and silly companies, and it was just abysmal. So the SPAC market has imploded, and it's very easy to see, it's very easy to predict. We're very different because the companies that we invest in the SPAC market are exceedingly high-quality companies. You have Utz potato chip, a 100-year-old business with tremendous ramp up ahead. We invest in a company called E2, which is a supply chain software company. One of the largest issues in corporate America today is supply chain. How do you get your products? How do you move? A company like Dell or Peloton, they really don't make their products. There's manufacturing partners, the distribution partners, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of suppliers that are responsible for a Peloton product or a Dell product. So the supply chain software is very important to tie that together. So this is a company that has runway to grow at double digits for the industry, has very high margins, has over 100% renewal rate each year. So those are kind of companies that we invest in, very different from everybody else. The other thing that's differentiated is that we have dedicated capital. Most SPACs, if not all SPACs, have very, very little dedicated capital. On the Getty deal that we recently announced, there was over $600 million of dedicated capital that we brought to the equation from us and Neuberger Berman and the Inbox Fund. So very long answer, but the SPAC market needs to be cleansed. It'll come back in a different form. And I think it's a product that should be in the market, but for high quality companies with dedicated capital, with real investors, instead of promoters with no capital and poor quality companies.
Thank you. I'm going to combine these two questions. How do you find balance between work and personal life? And what's a lesson you've learned from each decade of your life that you would like to pass to, specifically to Vietnamese Americans here today?
Wow.
I think the early parts of your life, it's going to be dominated, frankly, by work, or at least mine was. And that's okay, because I really enjoy it. As I said, if you get a free few hours over the weekend, that's a great thing. And I made a conscious decision to focus on work, against personal life, against music or passions that I've had, and that's a conscious decision. But I think you just sleep less, right? You sleep 4 hours. And if you want to go out, you sleep less. It's a pretty easy thing to do. I think the later parts of your life, after you have kids, I think your focus should be equal balance on the kids, because that's probably the most important thing. But you also have to balance it with work and other things you have going on as well. So you go through these phases.
Thank you. What's next for CC Capital? Would you consider having more emerging markets?
I think it's hard to invest in emerging markets, and we're not, frankly, experts in emerging markets. If it's Europe, the answer is yes. Asia is maybe. I think other parts of the world, I think it's difficult. The risk profiles are higher. The returns profile are relatively the same. And there's so many great opportunities in North America and Europe that I think emerging markets would not be one of our key focus.
So would you think that too, because the follow-up question is, do you think there are opportunities for PE deals in Vietnam and Southeast Asia?
There are. There are terrific PE deals in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. There are firms that are better suited to do than CC Capital. Vina Capital, run by Don Lam, they do a phenomenal job. There's a number of Singaporean firms and other firms. They tend to be a little bit smaller, a little bit more growthy, and has more complications with government regulations. So the answer is yes. It's just whether you want to focus your time. We think we have ample opportunities here, and I'm not sure we have a significant competitive advantage in deals in Vietnam. They tend to be smaller, and we tend to focus on the much larger deals.
I'm going to combine 4 questions. What is your outlook for the private equity market in 2023? And is it more difficult to start a career in PE now than 25 years ago, especially for Asian Americans?
When I first got started in private equity, I remember lamenting to one of my friends. I said, I think I'm too late. I think I wish I started 5 years earlier. I wish I was hanging around with Henry Kravis before Steve started the business. And my God, only if I got started earlier. Obviously, that didn't turn out to be the case. I would say that the trends for alternative assets, which PE is a part of, will continue. This trend of going from 4%, as I told you before, of allocation for the pension funds to 20% today, from 4% from the endowments going to 40% today, will continue, I think, at least for another decade or so. Just as you can see in the stock market, going from active management to passive management, i.e. stock picking to ETFs, That's gone from a few percent to 50% today. That will continue unabated. So the answer is that no, you're not too late. Over the next 3 years will be some of the best private equity deals that will be done, because vintage class is a very important measure of success for private equity. When you take a look at the last 40 years, you can see the various troughs in private equity, and those are phenomenal deals to be done because the companies, the high-quality companies, are available at lower price, and there's less risks involved in it because you don't have the amplitude issue of the declining sales or EBITDA. So the answer is no. This is a terrific time to be in private equity. I know for a lot of young people that you haven't seen this cycle before, but for us who's been through a number of these cycles, we're very excited about it.
Thank you. We're going to switch a little bit here. Do you see a bamboo ceiling for Asian Americans on Wall Street? And then traditionally, refugee Vietnamese families define success as earning a lot of money, being a doctor, a banker, an engineer, and attending a top university in America. Do you agree with that?
I think it's about your passion. If you are passionate and you are happy being a doctor, I think it's probably more noble than being a finance person, because you actually save lives and you do something real. So I have immense respect for my sister who's a doctor, my dad's a doctor, a lot of relatives who are doctors. But you have to find your passion. I think if finance your passion, it's not about the money. It's about the learning. It's about the contribution you have, and it's about enjoying your job, because you can't work 70, 80 hours without really, really enjoying it.
Great. So I have a lot of questions here from the Columbia Investment Club, and 2/3 of it is having a summer internship at CC Capital, which I'm actually, thank you, which I think you can talk to the team who's
You can talk
here.
to Doug over there.
Yes. Afterwards. But I will read a few. What's your thoughts on quant finance from the angle of private equity?
That's a very interesting question. There are, as you know, the advent of hedge funds using quant has been decades in the making and has been quite successful. It's actually some of the largest and most successful firms, whether you're talking about a Renaissance, are quant-based. I remember doing due diligence on a firm that I will not name at Blackstone to invest in, which is a quant hedge fund that has 30-something strategies. Each strategy, if the strategy loses $10,000, they shut down the computer system, reprogram it, and then start over again. And that firm generated 0 months of loss for a very extended period of time. And you had a marriage of the ideas coming from the investment professionals and computers doing the work on the quant side to pick the stock. And at the end of every day, they disposed of the positions, and there was no risks in it whatsoever. So I thought that was absolutely fascinating, that diligence process. That now has been continued with AI, with machine learning, with very sophisticated strategies where the data scientists inside the firm is more important or as important as an investment professional. That hasn't yet gravitated over to the private equity area yet. I'm talking about more the hedge fund side of the world. But I think elements of that will gravitate over to private equity, and that could be a very useful tool in our kit to evaluate companies and to make investments. I don't think it'll replace the judgment of a private equity professional. It doesn't replace sitting across the table with a CEO. It doesn't replace how you negotiate the deal, because these are not stocks that you're buying. You're investing in a company. You're buying somebody's 100-year-old family business. So the quant, I think, will be an element of diligence, but I don't think it'll replace the business of private equity, whereas in hedge fund, it can in some cases.
From the Columbia Investment Club, What challenges did you face when you tried to start CC Capital, and what's your biggest advice for the students of Columbia University entering into the finance, hedge fund, and private equity world?
That's a very broad question. The advice I have is the advice I give everybody, which is find something you're passionate about, work hard, and persevere, and enjoy it. I mean, life's too short to work at something you don't enjoy. When I started CC Capital, Doug and I were very simpatical in our views. We were fortunate enough to have the experience set that we have. This is not a startup without any experience. Given my 25 and a half years at Blackstone, we were fortunate enough to have the capital to start the business. So it's just, once again, picking the right path, having the right people, and having the right mission statement.
What's the most successful deal at Blackstone that you've ever done?
What's the most, I'm sorry?
What's the most successful deal at Blackstone that you have worked on?
The most successful deal at Blackstone I did was a company called Celanese, publicly listed chemical company in Germany, not in the US. It was listed in a German stock exchange. I remember flying over to Frankfurt from New York once a month for 2 years to try to get the deal done. And at that time, Blackstone did not have a European office. So, and Germany was pretty nationalistic. So it was a very interesting thing that an Asian private equity guy from a Wall Street firm in New York tried to buy out a German company, which I think it was also 100-something years old. We had a thesis that this could be a very, very successful transaction, partly because it was listed in the wrong exchange. It should be listed in New York. 60% of its operations were in the US, despite the fact that it was born in Germany and had the old operation. So long story short, after years and years of pursuit, we were able to tee up the company for a transaction. The board was divided on whether to sell the company. We were able to make a friendly bid for the company, but we needed 75% shareholder approval. In Germany, if you don't get 75% of the shareholders to tender, the deal does not go through, even if the board agrees to do so. So after a few years, I think we spent something like $15 million of expenses to pursue the deal, which in 2005, that was real money. And I remember Schwarzman, Steve, sitting in my office on the day of the final tender offer, saying, are we going to get this done? Are we going to get this done? And it's a little bit of a game because you had to convince the shareholders to tender, but if they don't tender, if they're the remaining 20% that don't tender, they actually make more money because there's a very convoluted valuation process where if you don't tender, you probably get 20% more 2 months later. So people liked the deal, but there was a lot of gamesmanship, a prisoner's dilemma to not tender. So that night, we got 72.3%, short of 75. And
amazing.
Everybody in the firm was quite nervous because, and thought the deal was dead because you need 75%. But we figured out, I was pretty confident because the system in Germany at that time was some computer and some paper-based. So I knew that there was this guy that we negotiated a golf course who tendered it late. We scared him to tendering. There's another guy. So I told Steve, we're going to be fine. It will take a couple of days to come through, all the paperwork. So long story short, after a few days, we got 80%, so the deal went through. We took over the company. We moved the headquarters from Frankfurt to Dallas, which is not a very popular decision. We closed down 3 manufacturing centers in Germany. We sold one division. We bought another company in Canada. And we did all that in 9 months. I was executive chairman of the company. And we took it public and made 3.5 times our money. And at that time, it was the most successful deal in Blackstone's history and the most profitable deal, and it was there for, I don't know, 10 years. It was the most successful deal for Blackstone for a long time. So that was the Celanese story.
Your 2 daughters are sitting here tonight. What's the biggest lesson you want to tell them, and the advice.
Consistent with what I said, I think to be passionate about life, I always stress positive mental attitude, hard work, and random acts of kindness. I know random acts of kindness. I know they hate. I say that all the time. I'm like a broken record.
Thank you. How are we doing on time? 5 minutes? Okay. Last question. As an Asian American, as a Vietnamese American, what is your view on the importance of philanthropy?
It is of utmost importance that we are so privileged for us to give back and give back the right way. One of my most memorable moments in the business world was not business. In a business dinner, I got sat next to Professor Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Prize for Grameen Bank. And the whole dinner, we talked about his contribution to the world, how he's helped, I think, something like 80 million women, 100 million women. It's just unbelievable. With microfinancing, and what I loved about it was a perpetual charity. It was something that you can do, you can regenerate, you can give back, and it'll live on beyond him, beyond us. And I'm really, really fascinated in that. That's something I'm doing a lot of work on and a lot of thinking about, on how to have a regenerative charity, to have a legacy that's beyond any of us. It's very important to give back. I think we are very, very fortunate, very honored, and I'm humbled. My story is no different from a lot of Vietnamese immigrant stories, and my story would be nowhere without my parents, and it's really, truly a testament to the hard work of my parents, the perseverance of the Vietnamese community and people, and frankly, the great country that we live in. Without this country, without America, I'm not sure all of this could have been accomplished. And it's about family. So we're very humbled, and the least we could do is to give back and give back the right way.
Yeah. And one end note that I want to mention, Anh Chinh had told me that one of the most vivid memories he has in his life is his mother frying 2 eggs. And at that time, there were only 4 children instead of 6. And each of the children had 1/4 of the first egg, and then the second egg was for his father because he had to go to work that day, and he had so much work waiting for him, you know. And his parents have always stressed the crucialness of working your utmost, and it's part of the underlying passion, the thread through all of his life.
Thank you so much. I've been very touched, by the way, these past few weeks in helping organize this event. I've gotten emails, texts from so many Vietnamese Americans from the West Coast, from New York, and beyond, who just are very proud that Chinh is here tonight. So many people have asked for videotapes and even a transcript. I hope that, well, thank you, Chinh, for coming tonight. On behalf of Columbia University, thank you so much, and another round of applause for Chinh Chu.
You're so good at answering my question.